Wednesday, October 3rd, is it?
3rd.
3rd, 2018. And this, I'm Fran Duval, your host for today, and I'm here with Len Kalkwarf, our resident authority on the presidential libraries, having been to, he and his wife, been to every presidential library, and maybe some that aren't under the aegis of the official, what is that official called?
Well, the official 13 presidential libraries, but Bev and I have visited at least one site pertaining to every one of our former presidents.
I'll be darned.
So,
yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some of them have things like a home where they were born, or something along those lines.
Yeah, we went to
or
many
museums,
of those, and some of those have some other high points that we also visited, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
But today, we're going to look at Bill Clinton's library. And in looking back over the book that you wrote about all these libraries, I was looking at that particular section on Bill Clinton and was struck by, and you're probably going to address it anyway, the organization of that library was one of the best, if not the best.
I would say that was probably the best organized of all of the presidential libraries that we went to, including those that are some that are not official libraries that we've been to. So yeah, I was very much impressed with that. In fact, that's what we're going to do when we start out this morning. We're going to talk about the presidential libraries of Bill Clinton. I suspect, though, that when people talk about Bill Clinton, the thing that they remember, unfortunately, is
the scandal.
The scandal.
Yeah.
But there are so many other things about Clinton that we ought to be aware of, and I want to lift up some of those things. But first of all, before we do that, I'd like to go and see some pictures of the presidential library. So I'm going to have to see the monitor a bit more. The president, his library, of course, is located in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we'll go on to the next one, for example. I think when I first saw this, I was not overly impressed with the building. It seemed like a strange shape, for example. But as I began to realize what it was all about, it indicates a bridge from one century to the next, and that was the theme of his.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so.
You know, I was living in D.C., or in this area of that, and of course when he was elected and all the bell ringing went on, they went out onto the bridges here, like Memorial Bridge and the Roslyn Bridge. Yeah.
Well, this is located right next to the Arkansas River, and there is a railroad. There was a railroad there, and the railway is no longer there. But the old train station is there. But let's go on now to go on. Another shot of it looks like a big elongated box, and I guess that's what it is. But very well done when we start getting inside.
You used the term that you thought it looked sort of futuristic, rather than even modern, but more futuristic.
Yeah. Okay. This, of course, speaks about his presidency and what he proposed to do, which we can't read from the monitor here, but I'm sure on television you can see this. Okay. All right, let's go on. There are some things about his campaigning and so on that is in the library. Not an awful lot, not like some of the other presidents, but I guess every president puts a few pictures in there regarding what he did when he was running for previous offices, and most of them served in some kind of a previous office. And of course Clinton, and a number of them, and he was governor of Arkansas, and then next time he lost it, and then he won it the next time. And he soon got the title the Comeback Kid, and he did come back a number of times in many different ways. Okay. And he always talked about the future, and he was focusing on the future, how he was going to lead the country into a better way, which he did, and I'll mention some of those things shortly. Okay. Now, the blue, of course, represents the Democratic and the states that Clinton won, and you'll notice that he won a good number of the southern states as well. He lost those states in the Midwest, but not all of them, obviously. Hillary was very important as far as he was concerned in the presidency. Question about whether or not she was helpful or not helpful when it came to the health issue, because he put her in charge of the health issue. So, okay. It takes a family. Yeah.
Takes a village.
Takes a village. Yes.
We know that here.
Yeah.
My goodness, what is this map?
Yeah, it's very, very difficult to read from here. Only if you can see it up close. It again, one of the many, many maps and graphics that he has in the.
And what do they show? What?
Well, any number. Not only the election results and so on, but some of the things that he was doing, for example.
For particular places.
Yes.
I see.
Okay.
I see.
All right. This was one of the things that helped him very much in terms of overseas. He was concerned about the poor countries and having democracy established there. Okay. Again, a picture that's very difficult for us to read from here. Now, every library is supposed to be a balanced library, indicating what the president did. And it's really left up to the committee that's responsible for establishing it. And if it is not done properly, if there's not enough balance, then they will not make this one of the official libraries.
I see.
And this, of course, is what happened to Richard Nixon. That library was established but had nothing about Watergate in it, and so the administration would not accept that as one of the official libraries for I don't know how many years before they finally accepted it, only because they did put these displays in about Watergate. So, so at least in Little Rock, there is a emphasis about the impeachment, and there's a number of things about it. So it is not glossed over. It recognized the fact that this was a major event in the Clinton presidency. So. Okay. Now there are those who recognize that maybe this whole impeachment thing on Clinton was politically motivated. Certainly many people feel that way, and they recognize this here. So, okay. All right. I can't read that from here.
It says the fight for power.
Yeah, the fight for
power.
At
the top.
Yeah.
Who was he fighting? The Congress?
Well, he was fighting really the right wing of the Republican Party.
I see.
Yeah,
okay.
Very much so, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Now, this is one of the things that Clinton emphasized again and again. Ideas do matter. Just like words do matter, ideas matter. And he was very, very meticulous about this. Okay. The displays there are in wonderful order, and some of the pictures that we saw earlier, you'll see right here, is one of the pictures that you couldn't read.
Yeah, but you can read them clearly there.
Oh yes, and it's several rows of all of this as you walk through the library. It's very well organized. I think every president and their former president has a replica of the Oval Office.
At the time they were in office, yeah.
Unfortunately, in every case, you can't go in it except when it gets to George W. Bush's library. But none of them, in any case, you can't go into these. You just look at.
So how did you get this picture?
You look through the door.
Oh, okay. Okay. you can't go sit in the president's chair
Not
and
here.
get your picture taken.
That's one thing about George W. Bush's library. You can.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, they even give you the opportunity to make a phone call from there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay. The old railroad station, right next to the library that we saw, is the Clinton School of Public Service. And if you go here, you can get your degree in public service from the University of Arkansas. It's a combination here.
I see.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I think we have one more picture. There's the old railroad station.
Okay.
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 You all were there at a good time of year.
Yeah, I forget when it was, but
Yeah.
looks good. All right. All right, let's talk a little bit about Clinton and what he did and what he proposed to do. He promised to focus on the future, and he did. And he was concerned about the economic needs of the nation. And by the end of the first year, he had secured the adoption of a package that combined tax increases, mostly put on the upper class, and spending cuts. And those spending cuts hurt some of the poor people, but it was an economic package that he felt was absolutely necessary to get the country moving again. And he did so without a single Republican vote. So he was constantly fighting Congress. Yeah. And as a result of this, the deficit was lowered from $290 billion in 1992 to $203 billion by 1994.
Wow.
And by 1999, the tax revenues from that booming economy gave a surplus of $124 billion, which is almost an unheard of thing in government, federal government. And a lot of that probably was due to the booming economy because of the internet, the .com. This was the time when we talked about the information age kind of got started. Amazon.com, for example, got started during this time, selling only books, for example. But now look what happened. Has happened to see.
Yeah.
And that tax income helped establish this booming economy. The other thing that he did is he passed NAFTA, which is, of course, the North Atlantic Free Trade Association.
Agreement.
Yeah.
Is that what the A is for agreement?
Agreement, yeah.
Yeah.
That included basically, I guess, Canada and Mexico. And what has happened recently in terms of Trump, they have basically taken the same framework and made some changes. And many felt that that was necessary. But in any event, it was Clinton who really started this. Now, the Republicans had already said that this is the type of thing they wanted, but they had never been able to pass it. But Clinton was able to do that. And the other thing that he was able to accomplish, he established the lowest unemployment rate in, I guess it's about 30-year period, since 1969. And he added 20.4 million new jobs. In addition to that, he balanced the budget and the deficit was erased. Now, this is a kind of an unusual type of thing to expect.
Yeah, everybody claims they're going to do that when they come into office,
right.
But very few can accomplish that. Was that one of his campaign issues? I think
so.
Balancing the budget might have been, but
well, yeah, he was speaking in terms of the economic changes in the future, and yes, I think that was part of it. So yeah, okay, all right. Then he had another crisis he had to deal with, and that had to do with the military and gays and lesbians. And you may recall that was a very controversial thing at the time. And finally, the administration developed a policy of don't ask, don't tell. And that continued in existence as the policy of the government until 2001, when Obama changed this. But up until then, gays and lesbians would not be accepted in the military if they admitted that that's what they were. So, okay. Another major thing that he did was welfare reform. Now, welfare, as we know it today, really started under FDR during the Depression days.
Sure.
And Social Security is often regarded as being one of the welfare things. But he was talking about changing welfare as we know it now, and he did. He made the major changes. You may recall during the time of Ronald Reagan, he talked about the welfare queen, how certain, and especially minorities is what he was talking about, were ripping off the welfare system and so on. Well, Clinton made major changes to that whole welfare approach. And I think we have to go back to a number of things that were changed even before Clinton. And one of them was public housing. The establishment of a policy called Section 8, where a person who is unable to afford the rent can get government help under the Section 8 program. And if various landlords are willing to sign up for that, then a person can move into that rented house. And this takes place throughout the community, so that it may be a so-called welfare recipient is living in a house, and people are not even aware of the fact.
They don't know that there's a subsidy being given
That's
to
right.
the landowner. Yeah.
As long as we have landlords who are willing to go along with that.
Yeah.
And frankly, I think that's a fantastic program. Yeah, he made a number of changes to the welfare system, and it changed so that the money was given oftentimes now not directly to the recipient, but to the states, and the states then would be handing it out. Okay. All right. He did a number of things also that is hard to label in terms of numbers, but he put a large number of women to work in government, accepting women in government. Large number of minorities. But probably the thing that was one of his big political mistakes is when he made Hillary in charge of trying to reform the healthcare system. And of course that failed. Excuse me.
Yeah, it was sort of the beginning of looking at it as universally when she tried to do it, and it couldn't fly during that time. And whether it was because she was running it, or whether it would have done better under a male. Sorry to say that.
Well, maybe under a committee.
Okay.
That might have been better. All right. Of course, the big problem that he ran into, not just the health care, but the right wing of the Republican Party was after him. And this was the time when Fox News got started. Murdoch and Alice, both of them Republicans, established Fox News and made no bones about the fact that they were after to get him. So, and that is probably true to this day. Then Ken Starr was appointed, and that was a long time in doing. And unfortunately, millions of tax dollars were spent on that, and it ended up with nothing but
yeah.
So the interesting thing is that during this impeachment thing, his poll numbers remain still very, very high. So.
Yeah, it ended up to be a slap on the wrist.
Yes.
Rather than any change in how things were.
I think the poll numbers were like 70%. So, The other thing that happened during his election, the second term, when or midterm elections, when you would expect the other party to gain, the Republicans actually lost 5 seats in the House at that time, and gained no seats in the Senate, which traditionally was the opposite would take place. So. All right, so much for the domestic affairs. Move on to the foreign affairs, and Clinton had very little experience in this area, but he was a quick learner in many ways. He had gone to a school of public service, Georgetown School of Public Service, and certainly learned a lot in terms of what he should be doing. But he inherited some difficulties. Now, he followed George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush had sent troops into Somalia and hoping to, there was a major famine, helping the famine, overcome the famine. And Clinton followed that, but during that time, many of the some of the servicemen, American servicemen, were actually dragged through the streets and so on. So, so instead of continuing that, he withdrew them. He later on said that probably his greatest feeling of guilt has to do with what he did with Africa. He had to withdraw troops there, and then in Rwanda, the terrible massacre that was taking place there, and the United States did not do much, if anything, there. Same thing with Haiti. Nothing really good came out of that. In those 3 areas, I think he learned a lot, but he also did not do much at that particular point. So.
You know, and just you remind me that all the presidents have their strengths, and he was at the learning curve there.
Yes,
with all those things.
Right.
Yeah.
Then, of course, the Bosnia. This was another major thing. But when he realized that some thousands of Muslims were killed and so on, then he took action along with the United Nations. And so that probably was one of his great successes, so, and was able to end that particular war and so on. Let's see. Then he developed what is called the doctrine of enlargement. And the doctrine of enlargement basically says work together along with the United Nations. He was a great believer in working with the United Nations and other countries to develop a global economy, global trade, and global democracy. And peacekeeping would be a multitask from various countries under the auspices of the United Nations. There would be strong international alliances, and these, he felt, would make some of these countries much, much stronger. So that was the doctrine of enlargement. Now, to summarize some of his successes, he really succeeded where no other Democrat had since FDR. So, and he was a young president, very well accepted as, because of his youth and so on. He was elected easily to a second term. He turned the great fiscal deficits in the United States into a positive and was able to overcome those. He was effectively able to use American forces to overcome all of this ethnic cleansing that was taking place around the world, like Bosnia and other places. Okay. He probably established the greatest level of economic prosperity since the early 1960s, so the country really was much better off than that. He endured some very vicious right-wing attacks against him, but he was able to overcome that. He was true to his reputation of being the comeback kid many times. Now, he did lose Congress to the Republican Party for the first time in 40 years, probably much of it due to the impeachment. So, well, there may be questions about his presidency. I think overall there's a tremendous positive thing to be said about it. So that kind of wraps up what I have.
Well, good. There was a lot about him that needed to be focused on.
Yeah.
These two-term presidents require more information.
Yeah.
What is that book you have laying over there?
Okay, this is.
Was that your one of
well,
your
this
sources?
is one of the sources.
Yeah.
Now, in fact, I have a book of every president that's ever served, and it's called. Let's see, the official title: The American Presidents.
Okay.
And it is a Time Books under Henry Holt Company.
Okay.
Okay. Let me just mention the Schlesinger is the.
We have to wrap up.
Okay, but he is the editor-in-chief.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'm sorry. I raised a question and then didn't give you time to answer.
Okay.
Thank you, Len, very
right.
much.
Yeah.
Very informative.